Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's Wednesday. Today we begin a brand new book in our Poppy series. This book is entitled Poppy and Rye. And we'll read what's on the back to see if we're going to look forward to this book. A flooded brook and a broken heart put Poppy in danger. Heartbroken over the death of her fiancé, Ragweed, Poppy, a deer mouse, journeys west through the vast dimwood forest to bring this sad news to Ragweed's family. But Poppy and her prickly porcupine pal, Erith, arrive only to discover that beavers have flooded the serene valley where Ragweed lived. Together, Poppy and Ragweed's brother, Rye, brave kidnapping, imprisonment, and a daring rescue to fight the beavers. At the same time, Rye, who has lived in Ragweed's shadow, fights to prove himself worthy of Poppy's love. Okay, it sounds like another adventure. There are some dangers. Every book so far has had kind of what we would call a villain, which means something that doesn't get along with the mice. We had the cats in the first book, the owl in the second book, and in this book, it looks like the bad guys are going to be the beavers. We have a map, just like in the other two books. It has a big pond in the middle. Here's an arrow up here that says the woodlands to Dimwood Forest. Down here it shows the beaver dam. This is where the mice used to live. And up here is the new home of the mice. And this is kind of what a beaver dam looks like on the inside. Beavers, what they do is they get logs and mud and sticks and stuff, and they put it all together and they pile it up, and eventually it does actually make a dam, which stops the water from being able to run. So it looks like they made their dam across the brook, and now they've created a pond, which is wonderful for them, but I guess not so good for the mice. Chapter 1, Clover and Valerian. Clover, Clover, love, you need to wake up. Something awful is happening. Clover, a golden mouse, was small, round, and fast asleep in a snug corner of her underground nest. Too sleepy to make sense of the words being spoke to her, she opened her silky black eyes, looked up, and gasped. What was Ragweed leaning over her? Ragweed was a particular favorite of her 63 children. He had gone east in search of adventures, but had not been heard of for 4 months. Clover missed him terribly and kept wishing he'd come back. Her eyes focused. She could see more clearly now. Valerian, she asked, is that you? Valerian was Clover's husband. He was a long-faced, lanky, middle-aged golden mouse with shabby fur of orange hue and scruffy whiskers edged with gray. His face bore the fixed expression of being perpetually overwhelmed without knowing quite what to do about it. At the moment, his tail was whipping about in great agitation. Is something the matter with the children? Clover asked. She had recently given birth to a new litter, her 4th that year, and was so tired she hadn't ventured from the nest in more than a week. They're fine, Valerian assured her, But Clover, you've got to see what I've discovered. You're not going to believe it. Can't you just tell me what it is? Clover replied with a yawn. She never got enough sleep. Clover, Valerian whispered, we're in great danger. A startled Clover looked about the nest where she and Valerian and all their children had made their home for 6 happy years. A small, deep, and comfortable nest consisting of 3 chambers. Each of its rooms was lined with milkweed fluff. There were a family room, a master bedroom, and the children's nursery, where 13 of the children were currently sleeping. The most recent litter, 3 in number and barely a week old, were still blind and without fur. They were with Clover. Clover, love, Valerian urged, please get up. It's not the children, but it will affect them badly. With Clover, an appeal to family never failed. She forced herself up. The 2 mice made their way up the entry hole to the ground surface. The long, twisting tunnel had a few storage rooms, one filled with nuts, another filled with dried berries, a third with seeds built into the walls. Though Clover was, as usual, hungry, there was no time to eat. When Valerian reached the ground surface, he stuck his nose out the entry hole, sniffed, then gazed about. Certain there were no foxes, wildcats, or snakes, or any other danger about. He hauled himself out of the hole. Clover followed. Tall, leafy trees, bushes, and brambles veiled the late summer sky, a sky aglow with the light of a full moon. The air was humid, the breeze soft. Barks and buzzes, grunts and chirps seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Valerian scampered down one of the many paths that radiated from the nest. When he took the path that followed a steep decline, Clover knew they were heading for the brook. The brook, as the mice called it, meandered lazily between low leafy banks. Water lilies floated on its wide, shallow surface. There, fireflies flashed. Butterflies danced. Mosquitoes, like ancient instruments, droned. Water bugs scooted. Cattails, standing tall, swayed to the rhythm of the night. With nothing rough or dangerous about the brook, the young mice loved to frolic about its banks. Rarely was the water more than 6 inches deep. Splendid to splash in, fun to swim in. Sometimes the mice made rafts of bark chips and went boating. Indeed, it was the closest of the brook in its serenity that caused Clover and Valerian to build their nest and raise their family where they did. That night, everything was changed. The water was muddier and deeper than it ever before had been. A full 3 feet of bare earth at the base of the pathway, the children's beach, had sunk beneath water. Lily pads and cattails were gone. No bugs teased the brook's surface. Chips of wood floated here, there, everywhere. Look, Valerian cried in a hushed voice. He pointed downstream. At first, Clover didn't see it. Only gradually did she perceive the massive mound of sticks, twigs, and logs that spread across the full width of the stream. Why, my goodness, she gasped. it's a dam. But why? Valerian pointed to the water's edge. What should I be looking at? Asked a puzzled Clover. The water, Valerian whispered. Watch. Clover stared until, with a shock, she jumped back. Valerian, she cried, the water is rising. Exactly. But if it keeps coming that fast, our home will be flooded. Valerian nodded. Clover, love, I'm afraid the whole neighborhood is going under. But, Clover stammered. Who would do such a dreadful thing? Take a gander out there, Valerian urged. This time he pointed across the water. Clover stared. At first she thought she was seeing nothing more than a floating brown lump of earth or wood. Then, with a start, she realized it was an animal swimming on the water's surface. He was a large, porty fellow with thick, glossy brown fur, a black nose, and two beady eyes. Two enormous buck teeth, brilliant orange in the light of the moon, stuck out from his mouth like chisels. A beaver! Clover, Clover exclaimed. Just to say the word brought understanding. Beavers had come and dammed the brook. As Clover and Valerian stared, the beaver saw them. Lifting his water-soaked head, he offered an immense, toothy smile. Bless my teeth and smooth my tail, the beaver called out in a loud voice. I do believe it's my new neighbors. Hey, pal. Evening, sweetheart. Tickled pink to meet up with you. The name is Castor P. Candid, but everybody calls me Cass. Hey, he added with another toothy grin, you know what the old philosopher says, a stranger is a friend you haven't met. As for me, I'm head of the construction company that's doing the work here. Candid and Company, progress without pain. That's our motto. But you've destroyed our brook, Clover managed to say. Easy does it, sweetheart, easy does it, Mr. Candid boomed with insistent good-natured. Don't need to make a mountain out of a molehill, do we? Or for that matter, he added with a laugh that set his belly to shaking, an ocean out of a puddle. Without saying another word, Valerian and Clover turned and fled back up the path. Have a nice day, the beaver shouted after them, though it was the middle of the night. I mean that sincerely. As the two mice dashed towards their nest, all Clover could think was, oh, Ragweed, please come home. We need you. Where are you? There's Clover and Valerian meeting their new neighbor, Cass. Chapter 2, Poppy and Erith. It was cool in Dimwood Forest, though the high canopy of trees, flecks of sunlight sprinkled the earth with spots of gold. But on the floor of the forest, made a long hollow and inside a long hollow and decaying log, it was all stink and muck. Oh, skunk quizzle, mocked the old porcupine who lived in the log. Who cares foot fungus about Ragweed's family? I bet they're nothing but nasty nose bumps. Though his full name was Erythazon dorsatrum. The porcupine insisted on being called Erith, and that's a good thing for me because I can't say his name. Nor the sweetest, not the sweetest smelling of creatures. He had a flat face with a blunt black nose and fierce grizzled whiskers. Sharp quills covered him from head to tail. He was talking to a deer mouse by the name of Poppy. Though most of her fur was soft orange-brown, Poppy had pure white fur on her round, graceful, plump belly. Her whiskers, which stuck straight out from her delicate pink nose, were quite full. Her toes were small, and her tail was long. As for her ears, they were relatively large and dark, and from the right one hung an earring, nothing more than a purple plastic bead dangling from a tiny chain. Erith, Poppy explained, if something happened to a child of yours, wouldn't you want to hear about it? Look here, slug brain, the porcupine said with something close to anger. I thought you liked living in my neighborhood. Thought you were my friend. But if you want to trundle off, forget me, make new friends, start a new life, go ahead. I got plenty of things to do. Like what? Poppy asked. Eating, the porcupine growled, and sleeping. With a rattle of quills, Erith moved off toward the far end of his log. Erith, Poppy pleaded as she followed after him. Let me try to explain one more time. Ragweed was a golden mouse. He was like no one I'd ever met before. And when he came here, I fell in love with him. Love, sneered Erith. You can put love in a wasp's nest and chew on it. But I did love him, Poppy insisted, and we were going to get married. Marriage, Erith hooted. Head for the toilet bowl and bring 2 plungers. But then, Poppy continued patiently, that owl, Mr. Okax killed him and... Poppy, stop. I've heard this slop 100 times. But all I want to do, an exasperated Poppy continued, is tell Ragweed's parents what happened to him. Don't you think they should know? Besides, I want to give them this. She touched the earring, so they'll have something to remember him by. Listen, Swamp Mouth, Erith said. Take my word. They don't care what happened to him. No more than I do. Wise up. You should have to be mushroom muckus not to know that. The thing is, Erith, Poppy persisted, the trip would be much nicer if you came along. It'll be an adventure. We'll see the world. Oh, frozen frog pipes, Erith cried. I don't want to see the world. I hate going places. I hate doing things. And I like being alone. Most of all, I'm sick of tired of hearing about ragweed. So beat it. The porcupine continued on toward the far end of his log. A frustrated Poppy let out a sigh, tenderly fingered Ragweed's earring, then went to the open end of the log and gazed out at Dimwood Forest. The forest of towering trees was her home. One moment it was dark, the next moment it was light. Usually serene, the forest often exploded with noisy life. Though Poppy loved the forest dearly and would miss it, she felt a great need to make the journey. Poppy had to acknowledge that there was no particular reason for Erith to go. He had never met Ragweed. Besides, Poppy hardly knew where his home was. Ragweed had never offered much detail about it. The Woodlands, he called his home area. He said it was a few miles west of Dimwood Forest. His family nest, he had once told her, was on the banks of a brook. He referred to it as little more than the brook. It's a decent spot, girl, Ragweed had told her. But know what I'm saying, like Dullsville. Totally nothing ever happens there. Tell me about your parents, Poppy had said to him. They're named Clover and Valerian, he said. Pretty cool for parents, but hey, I needed to see the world. And I did, too. Did they give you permission to go, Poppy asked, impressed with Ragweed's story. At the time, not only hadn't she gone far from where her own family lived, she was certain her parents would never allow her to travel. Ragweed laughed. Nah, they weren't too easy about what I was doing, particularly Clover, my old mouse. But, girl, a mouse has to do what a mouse has to do. Will you ever go back? Poppy wanted to know. Aw, sure, someday. Hey, dude, I'll take you there, Ragweed promised. Bet you'll like my folks. They'll think you're way sweet. Why? 'Cause you're my main girl. Girl? Then Poppy remembered. Ragweed had winked at her with a sense of his own saucy being. But Ragweed had died, and Poppy wanted to tell his parents what had happened. Maybe she mused, but it was a way of saying a final goodbye to the mouse she had loved. Still, to go all that distance alone would be quite an undertaking. It was not that Poppy was frightened of the distance or of being alone. It was merely a question of wanting to go with someone. True, she had plenty of sisters and brothers, cousins too, for that matter. Still, she could think of no better companion for an adventure than her best friend, Erith. But now the porcupine had said no. Poppy sighed. There were moments she actually thought Erith was jealous of Ragweed. Then the notion struck Poppy that it was probably nothing more than Erith feeling his age. How like Erith to be so proud she wouldn't admit to such a thing. She wished she had not pushed him so. Never mind, Poppy made up her mind. Since she wanted to go, she'd go alone. Oh well, she thought, I'm sure I'll meet someone interesting. Besides, once I get to Ragweed's brook, it should be pleasant and calm. Recalling his words about the brook, Poppy smiled. I could use a little dullness in my life, she thought. Poppy went back into the log to say goodbye to Erith. He was at the far, smelly end, licking a hunk of salt as if it were a lollipop. Trying to keep from inhaling too much, Poppy said. Erith, I wanted to say goodbye. The porcupine offered up an indifference grunt. And Erith, I should apologize. For what? Asking you to come. Erith paused to his licking and squinted angrily down at Poppy. Why? I should have remembered. You're too old for such a trip. The salt dropped from Erith's paws with a clatter. Too what? He gasped. Well, you know, Poppy said with care. Elderly. Me? Old? Elderly? The porcupine cried, quills bristling. You twisted bee burp, I can do whatever I want, where I want, when I want. Or are you hankering to turn yourself into a busted bee bottom? But Edith, look here, you prickle-tailed fur booger, he roared on. I can keep up with you any day of the week, night too, for that matters, you slippery spot of squirrel splat. You mean you'll come with me? Poppy cried, trying to keep from grinning. Blow your nose and fill a bucket, Iris screeched. Can't you understand anything? Never mind me going with you. You're going with me. With that, Iris burst past Poppy, moving so fast, so furiously, his quills combed her belly fur into 27 neat rows. Poppy, laughing, ran after him. And here's Edith taking off on their journey together. Okay, that was a good beginning to a new book. We think we've got bad guys. This time the bad guys are the beavers. And I think Ragweed's mom and dad are going to have to leave their home because it's going to be flooded. And we'll continue reading tomorrow and see what happens. Goodbye.